Hey friends, for our second week of exploring the spiritual disciplines, we're going to look at prayer. And prayer is central to our communion with God. Essentially, it creates connection, communion, and relationship. It fosters our partnership with God in the world. The Bible tells us that we're God's representatives, we're God's ambassadors, at work, on mission with Him in the world. And prayer is what connects us to how God is working and moving in the world and how we get to be a part of it. And honestly, I think a healthy and dynamic prayer life is what separates engaged, lively, spirit-filled Christians and separates them from the boring, lame, dull, mediocre Christians, because they're in tune with what God is doing in the world and what He's doing in their lives as well. So why do we think of prayer as a discipline? It seems easy enough, right? Well, we see in Luke 11 where the disciples who had followed Jesus had learned so much from Him that even they got desperate and finally came to Jesus and said, "Lord, teach us to pray." They simply didn't know what to do. It's a skill that has to be learned and that can be cultivated and developed over time. But I think you simply just have to do it to get better at it. We learn just by jumping in and doing it, just like we said last week with the silence and meditation. We learn so much from the experience. And it takes practice and effort and dedication. You have to be focused on it. You have to be disciplined to make time and space in order for it to happen and to grow roots in your life. So throughout the Bible, examples abound of people praying. We see in Mark chapter 1 where Jesus got up early to get away and pray, as I mentioned last week. King David got up early and he sacrificed sleep that we see in Psalm 63. In Acts 6, the apostles even declared that their main priorities were prayer and teaching. And in Matthew 6, Jesus expected that we would pray because He tells the crowd, when you pray, it was expected that we would be praying. So how do we begin to pray? Well, first, I would say you got to tune in. Just like with the silence and the meditation, tune in to what God is doing. How is He speaking to you? Where is He at work in the world and in your life and the way that you engage with the world? Tune in to what God may be trying to tell you and teach you. There's so much going on around us. For example, Wi-Fi signals, radio signals, TV signals, all around us. Every minute of the day, right now in your room, right now in this office, there's signals and waves that are invisible going all around. And you wouldn't even know that they're there unless you turned on a radio to pick up a signal or you got your phone out to pick up Wi-Fi. Only then when you tune in do you realize what's going on around you. And so similarly with our prayer lives, we need to slow down, be quiet, be still, and talk to God to tune in and what He might be sharing and telling us. Secondly, you need to tool it. So often our prayers are inhibited or prevented because we just pray the same urgent prayers of the most immediate needs that are happening in our day or that morning, right? So if we use a tool to help us overcome our short-sighted, our emotions, that homework assignment that's due in an hour, or maybe the headache that's bothering you at that moment, we can tool it and use prayer tools to help us get in step with what God is doing in the world and what He's doing in our lives, and help us to overcome the immediate urgent needs in our prayer life. So for example, one tool I want to introduce you to is what I call the Lord's Prayer Pie, and it's divided into 7 sections based on the Lord's Prayer that Jesus teaches in Luke 11. You can see with yourself at the middle all of the ways that prayer becomes about us and becomes selfish. We focus on ourselves, making a name for ourselves, worrying about our plans, building our little mini kingdoms, distracted by our current struggles and wanting them to be taken away, present urgencies, conflict, quarrels, things that we're avoiding or bothered by, challenges that we keep being defeated by. So much of our prayer life is focused on ourselves and not on God and not on what He's doing in the world. So this is a simple tool that I want us to use to help take our prayer to the next level. So your application and challenge this week is to first download the Lord's Prayer Pie sheet in the notes below. And then I want you to spend some time writing out some prayers and taking some notes on how to make outward focused prayers in each of the pies. You can follow the order of it around clockwise and use it as a guide. Write down prayers that are not self-focused, but God-focused and outward focused. Also, consider adding 1 or 2 names of friends that you want to pray for, maybe family members, people you know that maybe aren't Christians that you can begin praying for. Maybe add one name or two names in each slice of the pie so that throughout the week you're praying for people as well. Also, if you want to build on your silence and meditation time each morning by adding an extra 5 minutes to pray, and use this tool as a guide. So just like we talked about last week, use your 10 minutes to calm yourself, invite the Holy Spirit, calm your inner world for 10 minutes, and then take the next 5 to pray through one piece of the pie this week and focus on outward prayers and not inward prayers that are self-focused and more selfish in nature. And then if you really want to level up challenge and go to the next level, I invite you to take 1 hour of uninterrupted prayer this week. Schedule aside 1 whole hour where you're not going to be distracted, you're not going to be interrupted. Set aside your phone, your Xbox, TV, everything else, and spend 1 whole hour praying through this Lord's Prayer pie. You'd be surprised with 7 sections how quickly an hour can go by when you get into a place where you're really focused on God and praying His prayers that are outward and not so selfish. And if you do that for an hour, I invite you to take 30 minutes and just jot down some notes, some reflections, what God brought to mind, the things you prayed for, and just the experience as a whole. Like, was it enjoyable? Was it not? What was hard about it? Reflect on some of those questions. And then when we gather on Sunday night for our Zoom call, love to talk about and process how all this went for you. So in closing, I would invite you to consider the sailboat analogy that we mentioned in the introduction. With prayer, just like working a sailboat, is simply a means of us putting up the masts, adjusting the rudder, adjusting the ropes in such a way that we're in tune with what God is doing in the world around us and what God is doing in our hearts. We can't make the wind blow, we can't make the ocean currents change, but we can put ourselves in a position to be in a place to be moved in the most effective way possible. And prayer is one of the ways that we do that.